Hey, good afternoon, everybody. This is Rob Shumay, and as you know, my partner, Ed Warner, is over in Germany right now. He is coaching the Rhine Fire as the offensive coordinator. Big news, the Rhine Fire in the NFL draft, as you probably saw, made a pick for their NFL partner team, the Seattle Seahawks. And we're looking forward to getting some updates from Coach Warner as the kickoff for the European Football League approaches on June 1st. We've got a great show today lined up. Our first guest is Mark Whicker, and he is a longtime story journalist with the Orange County Register, among others. And in the second half of the show, Bill Perkins joins us from Top Fan Rivalry. Now let's introduce the great Mark Whicker. How are you, Mark? Oh, can't hear you. I don't know. I think is your audio muted? I can't hear you. There's a little thing down on the left there, mute or unmute.
Okay, how's that? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, good.
Technology's when it works, isn't it?
It's not. I'm not cut out for it. I'm sorry, but I outlived it, I guess.
Mark's storied career in Los Angeles, Philadelphia, among other places. And, you know, I got to get right to it. The Los Angeles is like the hub of the sports world, it seems right now. And the Lakers are on everybody's mind. What's your opinion of the current state of that team?
Well, I guess we'll find out pretty soon. They're down 3-1 and have not really. They've done some odd things here recently. I know J.J. Redick played the starters the whole second half the other day, which was odd, and especially when one of them's 40 years old. And you know, I thought they would. I thought they'd beat Minnesota. I guess they still could, but you know, some of their flaws are beginning to show. They're not very big, and they've had trouble getting out on some of the 3-point shooters. And I guess it'll come down to who's going to be the best player in the series. Is it going to be Anthony Edwards, or is it going to be either Luka or LeBron James? So if I were the Timberwolves, I'd be feeling pretty good, but I wouldn't want to mess around too much because you don't want to have to win a Game 7 in LA.
Yeah, well, we've seen LeBron James put a team on his back before and carry him, but at his age, it gets a little tougher. But, you know, you mentioned Redick and his unusual coaching decision. If they lose this game tonight, do you think he's the coach next year?
Yeah, I do. I think they were pretty impressed with the way he's you know, they finished third, and they had, you know, they basically had a couple of different teams. You know, they had to put together the new team after they got Luka. And they played pretty well most of the year. They've been pretty consistent. They played good defense, and they won 50 games. And I know near the end of the season they went to Oklahoma City and won by 30. And so that they have it in them. It's just a matter of you know, can they get it going when they need to? And like I say, if they get a Game 7 back in LA, I like their chances because they were a very good home team, you know, most of the year.
Yeah. Do you think that what do you attribute this 3-1 start, or I should say 1-3 start in this series?
Well, I think Minnesota got healthy. You know, they've been playing better at the end of the year once they got everybody together. And Gobert came back. I think Randall had been out. He came back, and McDaniels has played very well. And they're just they're long and they're difficult to deal with inside. And you know, the games have been. You know, the game LA won was Game 2 was pretty decisive. They could have won either one of the games in Minnesota, but they didn't, and so it'll be a good test to see if the Luka and LeBron thing can work. I don't think anybody expected them to win a championship this year just because of they picked up Luka on the fly and they have some other holes to fill. But I think this is a pretty long-term project, kind of turning the team over to Luka, and I think LeBron's got a couple more good years left in him, so I think they're looking forward to that. But it would be a kind of a letdown for people here if they didn't win the series, because people got very excited when they got Luka. Laker fans are very excitable, so we'll see how that happens. But I think JJ will be back. I don't have too much of a doubt about that.
Well, you mentioned LeBron has a few good years left. Any concern that those years may not be with the Lakers?
No, I don't think so. I think especially since they got Luka, I think he looks at that as his key to a championship, and that's really one of the only reasons he's playing. He's also in the same organization with his son, which is very important to him. And there's no reason to think he can't play at least 2 more good years considering the shape that he's in. I mean, he still does amazing things. He got 38 points the other night, and I just don't think – I think you do need to rest him. And I think one of the good things about having Doncic there is that it's given him a chance to rest a little bit, not have to bring the ball up court, not have to be the point guard and the decision maker on every possession like he was before. So I think that part's good. I just think they need to continue to improve the group around him.
Yeah, and people overlook that, don't they? The ability to have another scorer and ball handler like that, so he can take a play off. I mean, you hate to say it that way; it sounds bad.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, everybody profits from that, and I think Austin Reeves too has been. A lot of people thought he would have to take a back seat when Doncic came along, but he played really well. And a series like this, you need all 3 of them playing at their maximum, and that hasn't happened very often in the series, but. Like I say, it's 3-1, and it's a little deceptive because if they win the home game, then really all they have to do is win in Minnesota to bring it back. So I don't think it's quite over.
Right. Do you think the NBA is kind of adopted this need 3 stars to win? Is Reeves that third star? Do you think?
Yeah, I've always heard it was like 2.5 superstars, and I think he's definitely I think he's half a superstar. I think he's he scores 18, 20 points a game, and he's a momentum player. He can get hot, and I think teams try to exploit him defensively, but he's pretty competitive. And JJ, I think, has a very good feel for who to match him up on, and they have a guy like Hachimura. I think can have his moments as well. They just need bigger players. When they lost Anthony Davis, we traded Anthony Davis, and that really took a lot of their size away. Before the trade, Anthony Davis was saying that he wished they'd gotten a center so he could play the 4, which is what he wants to do. But I think they do need some more size, especially defensively. That's what's been hurting them in this series, giving up a lot at the rim as well as the 3-pointers.
How surprised were you when that trade occurred?
If I'd been in a car, I would have probably had a wreck. I saw it on the computer and late on a Saturday night. And actually I saw it on TV on the crawl, and I had to kind of blink like, what, is this a prank or, what? And it really, it remained a mystery for a long time. I think in Dallas it still is a mystery, but I couldn't believe it. It's one of those moments where you kind of remember where you were, because I really, there's a lot of hype in the NBA about how this is the greatest thing that's ever happened. But I really do believe that this is probably the most consequential trade between 2 great players, fairly kind of in their prime, that I can think of. Kareem got traded, but he got traded for 4 players, and players have gotten traded here and there. But I can't think of a player of a team saying we're going to trade the guy that our team revolves around for one of the 2 guys that your team revolves around for no reason. I mean, it was really that both teams were having a good season, and I am curious to see what Dallas will look like when everybody's healthy. When Davis got hurt at the end of his first game there.
Yep.
They have 2 good centers that he could play with, and then Kyrie Irving got hurt. I am curious to see what that Dallas team is going to look like. I'm kind of confident they'll be a pretty good team if they do keep them all together. But in the interim, Nico Harrison has caught so much grief there. It's going to be a really long process to get the fans back on board.
Yeah, absolutely. And going to the second LA team to talk about, the Clippers. They're also down 1-3 in their series.
Well, they're down 3-2 after last night.
3-2. I'm sorry. Yeah.
But they, and then they come back for Game 6. Yeah, they got drilled last night. It was kind of a surprising that they didn't. This probably one of the few games that they played lately where they really haven't been competitive. And this is after really should have won a game the other day when Denver had that dunk at the end of the game. But they've since Kawhi Leonard's come back, they've been very good. And one of the things that's happened to them this year is that Jeff Van Gundy's on their staff, and he's really improved their defense. They're one of the better defensive teams in the league now. And, James Harden can still put up some points, but if Kawhi Leonard is there, then they're very difficult to guard, and they're also really good defensively. So, again, that's another series that's not quite over. They're pretty evenly matched. I was surprised that Denver won that game so decisively, but again, if the Clippers can come back and settle it in Denver, we'll see what happens. But I think both series have been very interesting.
A lot of outcry with Harden and his what people like to keep pointing out, his Game 5 problems. It seems.
Yeah. I mean, it's he's not the most enjoyable player to watch for a lot of us. He has been pretty effective on the offensive end. I just think that when Leonard is there as well, I think they can hide Harden a little better on defense than they normally could. It's like I said, it's a really good defensive team, and the center Zubac has been one of the most improved players in the league. In fact, he's one of the 3 finalists for most improved player for that award, and he's been a presence defensively and rebounding as well. I mean, he's a guy the Lakers traded very early in his career, and I think they've regretted that, because if he were still there with the group that they have, they would be pretty formidable. He's a really good player now.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you see the outcome of this series?
Well, I think the Clippers still have a good chance, because I think if you play it in Denver, Denver's depth is very suspect, and they need big games out of their 2 best players. They needed a big game out of Jamal Murray last night, and they got it. And of course, Jokic usually gives them a pretty big game. But I kind of like, if the Clippers can win the home game, I kind of like their chances of Game 7. When you go on the road, there's not as much pressure. And it's been kind of a turbulent season for Denver. If they if they don't win, then people are going to ask, well, why did you fire Michael Malone when you did, and a lot of other questions. So I think their depth and their defense, I think it will give the Clippers a pretty good chance if they can get past Game 6, which is in Inglewood.
Are you going to be at that game?
No, I'm retired. I don't go to any games anymore. I don't. I just watch.
Yeah, I just wondered if you went as a fan or.
No, I think it's hard to be a fan. I have a lot of respect for. I have a lot of wonder about fans of the prices that they pay and the places they have to park and all the other kind of indignities that they have to go through to watch games. It's amazing attendance is as good as it is throughout sports. But I don't. If I go to games, I've been to just a couple of Anaheim Ducks games and just a couple of other little college games here and there since I retired in 2022. If I show up, then I always feel like I'm in the way because I don't really have any business being there. And you get a lot better camera angles on TV anyway.
There you go. So moving over to the Dodgers, what's the most surprising thing about the Dodgers so far this season?
Not really anything, because I didn't think their pitching was suspect just from a health standpoint, and already Snell and Glasnow are on the injured list, and so that's not surprising. And the offense is pretty good. Probably could be a little better than it's been, but Ohtani's having a great year, and Teoscar Hernandez is having another great year, and Freeman started out hurt, but I mean I think they're going to score runs. I don't think there's any question about that. It's just a question of whether they get some starting pitching together. I think they'll be very active when trade time comes around to try to do something about that. I think their bullpen is probably in better shape than it's been in a long time with Tanner Scott and Kirby Yates. So, it's a really good division. You got 4 very competitive teams going down to the wire. I wouldn't be surprised if at least 2 of them are wild card teams. San Diego's playing well. The Giants have been a big surprise. They're playing very well. And so I think the series between all those teams are going to be a lot of fun. But with the Dodgers, there's only one acceptable outcome: is to win the World Series again. And so you have to kind of wait till you get down to October and see how healthy you are and see how well you're playing. And last year was one of the few years where they came into the World Series very sharp and very confident and with all guns firing at the same time, and they played very well. And other years they've had some bumps in the road, they've had some injuries, they've had some bullpen problems. So really, it's a mystery till we get there.
Well, their bullpen sure had. I mean, people don't realize how good it was last year, and I think, like you said, it's carried over into this year. So I think even with that shortage of starters, they're taking a page out of Cleveland's playbook, where they're, once that game gets to the seventh inning, it looks tough to come back against them.
Yeah, I think that's what they're counting on. And again, it's health, but Yates and Scott have been. I think they got Yates to pitch the eighth and Scott to pitch the ninth, and they've been kind of a grab bag for them in other years. They do have a lot of arms. They have,
Yep.
But it's just a question of how healthy they're going to be and how much they have to pitch. They really need starting pitching to get a little length. I mean, Yamamoto has been really good, but they've had trouble getting that type of performance out of anyone else. And I see they activated Tony Gonsolin, who hasn't pitched in a long time. So their health in the starting rotation has been a continuing problem, something that they've been trying to investigate as to why it's really so many of their pitchers get hurt, and they're trying to figure out why, even though it's an industry problem, it seems to be a little bit more pronounced with the Dodgers. So that process will continue.
Well, I think one person that if he were still with us would certainly have some answers as to durability, and that's Don Drysdale. And you just published a book, Up and In, about Mr. Drysdale. How did that come about? With why Don Drysdale?
Well, it was about 10 years ago. I noticed that there were so many books about baseball Hall of Famers, but there was not one on Drysdale, and I thought that was a little odd, considering how important he was to baseball in the 60s and what a symbol he was about the way the game was played and the career that he had, the scoreless streak that he had, the holdout that he had with Sandy Koufax, all the good things that he did, and the World Series that he pitched in. And I thought it would be a good idea to write about him. I knew him a little bit when he was a broadcaster. Of course, he died in 1993. And so I started doing some interviews with some people who knew him, and that was about 10 years ago, and the project kind of fell through. And when it reappeared a few years ago, I still had those notes. So fortunately, I still had the notes from Vin Scully and Stan Williams and a couple of people who are no longer with us. And then I interviewed everyone else I could. A lot of those people, it's been a long time since he pitched. Right. And got together with Ann Myers, who he was married the last few years of his life very happily. And then did a lot of research about, where he, the ins and outs of his career and all the details. And, I think that I just thought he was an interesting subject. I think he was a player with a lot of charisma that people identified with. He had a pretty good showbiz career outside of baseball, TV appearances and the like. And plus I knew him. I knew that he was a real fascinating character, and I really liked him. And I wanted to kind of put his life out there and see what people thought of him.
Now, what was one of the most surprising things that you learned or you didn't expect to uncover when you went through your research?
One of the things that people talk about is how fastidious he was as far as keeping a neat house. I think he got it from his mom. Like he would, back then everybody smoked. So if you left a cigarette in the ashtray, he'd empty it before you could light up another one, and he was very involved in houses and the building of the houses that he had, even when he was playing. His first wife, Ginger, and Ginger talked about how he was, he wanted to know where every nail was going and where everything was supposed to be. And Ann and he collaborated on the house that they had in Palm Desert. And, he was a very, he loved flowers and all those things, stuff you wouldn't really anticipate with him because he was kind of a big macho guy. But he, I think he and Bob Uecker and he were very close friends, and Uecker would go out there and would deliberately put his drink down where there wasn't a coaster just to see what Don would do, and Don would put a coaster down, and then Bob would put something up somewhere else, and Don would put another. You know, it was that type of thing. But yeah, that's probably the most surprising personality trait that he had. The other thing I didn't know, although it didn't surprise me, was when he was a player, how much he would take care of the younger guys in spring training. He would make sure that they had a lot of confidence. He would talk to the people around him and say, well, you know, I'm going to take care of you. And I know Don Sutton was one of his proteges. Sutton came up in 1966 after Drysdale had been up for a while. And one night, Don wanted to go to a nightclub in L.A. and had a date and everything. And Don picked up the tab and told the people at the nightclub to put Don and his date at the front row, and you know, things like that he did all the time. I mean, he was very cognizant of his teammates and was a very good teammate. And I think a lot of people looked at him as the real leader of that team. You know, even though Sandy Koufax was a better pitcher, Sandy had a different personality, and Don was a lot more outgoing. And I think that I heard people, it's in the book, you know, people talk about he was really the heart of those Dodger teams in the 1960s.
Now, you mentioned Sandy Koufax, and you know, you think about those Dodger teams in the 60s, those two are forever linked together, you know, Koufax and Drysdale. How close were they, you know, both on and off the field?
They were pretty close. You know, they did have different personalities, but they got together a lot after their playing days were over. Sandy would come out to Palm Desert and hang around in the house and with them and with Don and Ann. And they'll always be remembered for the holdout that they engineered in 1966. They missed spring training because they wanted a multi-year contract for both of them, which was unheard of back then. It was also unheard of for them to hire an agent, which they also did. And I wasn't living here then, but you know, when you talk to people and when you read the stories, LA was in a state of immense panic, thinking of, you know, how are we going to have a baseball season without Sandy Koufax and Don Drysdale? And they wanted a 3-year deal for each one of them. They didn't get it, but they did put the Dodgers through a lot of anxiety before at the end of that month, the end of March, they did sign up. Now, back then, they each signed a 1-year contract. Sandy got $125,000 and Don got $110,000, which was big money back then. And they had already signed to make TV shows and movies, and that was over. You know, by the time that was over by the time, you know, when they signed. Those projects were going to go away, and Buzzy Bavasi, the general manager, said that he should win the Academy Award that year because he kept these two guys off the screen because neither one of them knew how to act, which was might have been true in Sandy's case. It wasn't true in Don's, but it was quite an ordeal for everyone, and I think it did lead to a lot of the things that happened later. Players realized that they had some power, and later on, next few years, you saw the court cases that eventually led to the players becoming free agents in 1976.
Now, Don was a California kid, and how much of was this a returning home when the Dodgers moved to L.A.?
Well, he started in Brooklyn. He got to Brooklyn in 1956 and pitched there for 2 years. And
right,
he said that if the Dodgers had voted on whether to go to LA or not, they would have voted 25-0 not to go because they were all very comfortable in Brooklyn. They had their own little neighborhoods, the dry cleaners. They'd all go to the same dry cleaners. People knew them in the restaurants, knew them in the stores, knew them walking around, and they felt very good there. They felt at home. And whereas if you move to LA, anybody who goes to LA for the first time realizes that it's a whole new world. Nobody knows what's going on. Nobody knows where all these freeways are going. And you know, when the team came out, you had a lot of disorientation about where am I going to live? Where are my kids going to go to school? How long is it going to take me to get to the ballpark? And things like that. So Don was from Van Nuys, north of LA in the Valley. And his family was here. He was happy that they were able to come see him play. But I think he was perfectly happy to be in Brooklyn. And so that was an adjustment. The other adjustment was the team played in the LA Coliseum from 1958 through 1961. And there was a 250-foot fence in left field. And left-handed hitters were able to hit fly balls over that fence against Drysdale, and it kind of drove him crazy. I mean, he could really built up a real thing about the Coliseum. And then when he got into Dodger Stadium, the first year they played there was 1962. That was a much bigger ballpark, and Drysdale won the Cy Young Award that year. So he always lamented the fact that he had to play in the Coliseum, although oddly enough, his stats on the road during those years were not as good as his stats in the Coliseum. So it was just one of those mental things that got to him.
Yeah. You mentioned his acting career. How did he get into that? Was that something that interested him? Did someone draw him into it?
Well, I think when the Dodgers moved out, I think a lot of showbiz people adopted the team, and they showed up at the ballpark. Sammy Davis Jr. and Danny Kaye and Jeff Chandler and Doris Day. They were pretty, and the Dodgers were kind of looking around like, wow, these stars are really taking an interest in us. And so the showbiz people embraced the Dodgers, and I think one thing led to another, and he ended up on the Donna Reed show, Leave It to Beaver, and other shows and then he did a lot of westerns too. He was for a long time there, he was pretty hard to miss on TV, and I don't think he ever was serious about it as a full-time job after he got out, but he always had that option, and he was just very comfortable in all situations. He didn't get nervous about being around people. He was just going to be himself, and he was a big guy. He was a very recognizable guy, and he was such a presence in LA that people wanted him on the shows, and a lot of times he was playing himself on the situation comedies, so I think he would have. I think that was one of the things that made it more comfortable for him to be in Los Angeles again.
Am I correct remembering that he was on the Beverly Hillbillies?
I never ran into that. Of course, one of the lead characters in the Beverly Hillbillies was named Mr. Drysdale. He was a bank president on that show.
Exactly.
So I don't know. They might have borrowed that from his name, but when the show came out, probably did actually. But I don't think he was ever on the show itself.
Did he immerse himself into the social life with the stars as well, or was it just for the acting?
Some. I mean, I think one of the first things I write about in the book is when he was broadcasting for the Expos, and he and his partner Dave Van Horn came back from the ballpark one night or one afternoon. They played an afternoon game, and Don said, "Meet me in the lobby in 10 minutes. We're going to go out." And so Dave said, "Sure." He didn't know where they were going, and so they got in a cab and they went way downtown in New York, and this little club, and walked in there, and Frank Sinatra was there, and he had the table all ready for Don. They were buddies, and Dave didn't know anything about that, but he sat around and listened to Frank Sinatra and Don Drysdale tell stories for hours. He said, "Wow, I've died and gone to heaven," and he knew all those people. But I think generally speaking, he was at home a lot, and he was not, on the road, he would go out with his guys and paint the town pretty hard. He was a pretty hard runner at times on the road. But I think when he was home with Ginger and of course with Ann, I think he was a lot more of a homebody. Like I said, he enjoyed being at home and taking care of the home. So he had a lot of different, but he had lots of circles of friends. I mean, when he needed to be around people, there was no trouble finding somebody.
Obviously, this was a labor of love for you. Are you a longtime Dodger fan?
No, I really I wasn't. I grew up in North Carolina and didn't move to Los Angeles or to Orange County until 1987. But of course, I was very much aware of the Dodgers. They were a glamour team. I think my parents were Dodgers fans because they were always playing the Yankees, and they didn't like the Yankees. So, but yeah, all those players back then, Campanella and Pee Wee Reese and Duke Snyder and Gil Hodges. Don grew up with them. Don was a kid when he got there. And Campanella was one of his biggest influences as his catcher. And and I remember seeing Don on TV. I didn't see him in person until I moved out here and he was a broadcaster. But I remember seeing him on TV and said, "Wow, that's what a California guy looks like." Because back then, the world wasn't as small as it is now. And if you lived in California, you were a long way from the East Coast, and you didn't really know that much about it. So he had a lot of charisma, and plus just the way he pitched. He liked knocking people down. He was very aggressive. He had a very unique motion, and he pitched. He never missed a start. He had that
Yep.
long shutout streak. Those were all 9 inning shutouts, and so he was a symbol, like I said, of the way people pitched back then. People were very aggressive and wanted to pitch inside, insisted on pitching inside, and if the guy in front of you hit a home run, there was a good chance you were going down. So that's just the way the game was back in the '60s.
How would he look in that Dodger rotation today?
Well, he looked pretty good because he probably wouldn't be hurt. But then again, to be fair, he retired when he was 31 with a rotator cuff, and today they would probably put that rotator cuff back together. But back then they didn't know how to do that. So I think there was probably a good chance that the demands of that shutout streak in 1968 had a lot to do with the injuries that he had the next year when he did have to retire. So. He pitched, and Sandy Koufax also retired early. He had severe elbow problems, and I'm not sure that today's technology could have solved those. But back then, it wasn't unusual for pitchers once they get the bad shoulder to hit the road. And instead of hanging on, you didn't have that many. I mean, you had a guy like Warren Spahn who was kind of an athletic freak. He never got hurt and pitched well into his 40s. But back then, that was a lot more of a if you got hurt, there wasn't a lot they could do for you.
Yep. Mark, I appreciate your time. Wonderful spending time with you. Your book is available. I know it's on Amazon and any other places you want to plug it at.
Well, it's on it. Amazon would be one of the better places. You could get it on bookshop.org, which is another good source, and it's in most of the Barnes and Nobles. I think it's pretty well distributed from what I can tell. I've seen it in a lot of bookstores. And but yeah, if you want to get it tomorrow or the next day, you probably should go to one of the online services, preferably Amazon, and get it that way because it is available. And I think it's a fun read. It's got a lot of stories, and what I tried to do was present what it was like in those days. What the '60s were like, and he being a symbol of that. That's really what I tried to portray.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for your time, Mark. I appreciate it, and I wish you great success with this book.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate you having me on.
All right. Stay well.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're just going to take a short break here, and we will bring on our next guest, Bill Perkins from the Top Fan Rivalry.
Your fantasy sports fantasies are about to come true. Sleeper is the easiest and most social way to play fantasy sports with your friends and rivals.
Dad, Connor keeps breaking my
For the love of Mike, can I have 5 minutes?
Draft your team, chat in the app, and live your fantasy sports fantasy. Available on the App Store and Google Play. Sleeper, what's your fantasy?
Hey, welcome back, and I am happy to be joined by Bill Perkins. How are you, Bill?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you today, Rob?
Awesome. What's that background we're looking at?
Oh, it's just I just grabbed a background real quick and some stock image of somebody just hanging out by a pool or something. I don't know.
Gotcha.
I mean, if AJ's watching it, I think that's AJ right there in a banana hammock in the back there, but can't really tell.
Okay, Bill. I was enjoyed my time I spent on your show, and thank you for coming back on mine. So I'd like to just jump right into it.
Yeah.
You grew up where?
I grew up in Orange County, California.
Orange County, California. And your favorite team is?
The 2024, 2025, 2026, and 2027 world champion Los Angeles Dodgers.
So you had to appreciate Mark's discussion of Mr. Drysdale.
Yes. Yes. In fact, I've had the distinct pleasure of meeting with and talking to several times on the phone Don's youngest daughter.
How did that come about?
She doesn't live very far from me, and we found each other on social media and just had a nice conversation. It was great.
Awesome. So, your favorite ballpark?
Favorite ballpark is obviously Chavez Ravine. If you were going to ask me my favorite ballpark outside of Dodger Stadium,
Yes.
it's a very, 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 very close tie between Citi Field in New York for the Mets or Citizens Bank Park in Philadelphia.
Why those two?
I think they're both breathtaking parks, but the fans there are so kind. They're so great. When you go to Philadelphia, you sit up in section 301 with the Fandemic crew, Oscar, Brett, those guys up there, the Philly sports guy Jamie. They're just amazing people. When you go to Citi Field, I bump into my friends Blake and Jen and Frank and others, and it's just absolutely amazing.
How is
Amazing.
Philadelphia has a little bit of a tough reputation on the fans of opposing teams. Any truth to that?
Yes, if you start static. Obviously, if you want to start issues, then you're on your own, right? You're just that kind of special moron or something. I don't know, but no, in this case, and I was actually there with our marketing director, and she was wearing a Mets hat to a Phillies, believe it or not, Guardians game last season. And she's wearing a Mets hat trying to represent, and only one person said something to her. And immediately Oscar from the Fandemic crew jumped up and said, "Hey, bro, come on, she's from out of town." And so it was, I mean, these guys are pretty good. Now, I get it. They blew Santa Claus years ago at an Eagles game. I get it. They can be a little rough.
Snowballs were involved.
Yeah, just don't be an idiot and you should be fine, right?
So you had quite the illustrious career in high school, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I had a lot of success as a pitcher.
You actually beat a pitcher who started in the World Series. Is that true?
It is true. It is true. I actually beat Clyde Wright's kid, Jared. Jared and I are the same age, and obviously he went on to have a great career with the Guardian Indians. He played for a number of different teams, but great guy. We played in a Loera baseball tournament. I want to say it was either 93 or 94. I was a starting pitcher for my team. He was a starting pitcher for his high school team, and I beat him. And so there's some claim to fame. I told Jared that story about a year ago when I ran into him. He didn't remember me. I wouldn't have picked him out of a crowd, to be honest with you, Rob. Because he is he's a lot taller than I remember, and he's a lot more muscular than I remember. And he actually lives a couple of miles from where I'm sitting right now. Good guy, just a great family guy, incredible individual. But I told him that story, and he started laughing. He almost started laughing, kind of like, yeah, so that's your claim to fame? And I'm like, yeah, and I'm also pretty too, I tell you.
So if you were going to pay to go see a game, and let's skip the Dodgers right now, because obviously they're your team. Non-Dodgers, who would you pay to see in today's game?
I pay to see the Yankees. I like Aaron Judge, right? Aaron Judge. I'd pay to see the Yankees. I would probably, I have paid to see the Padres this season. They've got a good club over there. I'd probably pay to see the Phillies. Definitely the Red Sox. Definitely the Red Sox. That stadium up there at Fenway is amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Are you more geared toward the stadium or any particular players that you would be interested in seeing today, other than Judge?
So it's funny that you mentioned that question, because to me, it used to be about the players and it used to be about the team, right? The love for the team or the hate for the team or all of the things. Now it's become a thing, since I've been running Top Fan, it's become a thing about the fans too. So when the Guardians are playing now, I think of my friend Rob, right? When the Yankees are playing, I think of AJ. It's really, really easy to have those things. And I've had such great experiences in Fenway with folks. So probably a little bit of both, actually.
Let me ask you this. Would you prefer to see a 1-0 game or a 10-9 game?
As a former pitcher, a 1-0 game, because I know what it takes to get to that level. And most fans would prefer a 10-9 game, right? But no, I'm a 1-0 kind of guy. I like that.
Historically, who do you think, like if I say, the 1970s, who comes to your mind? What player?
1970s,
Yeah.
the Dodgers infield, Garvey Lopes, Russell Say, Reggie Jackson comes to mind. Mr. October, right? Let's not
Yep.
forget what he did in Oakland and hitting a ball out of Tiger Stadium on an All-Star game. Thurman Munson, who I believe deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. I don't care what you say. I think that cat deserves to be in the Hall of Fame.
And sure, if they made the exception for Kirby Puckett, Munson's in very similar situation.
Well, see, and here's my argument, Rob. At some point, we ought to do this. Maybe we get Luke on this or something like that, Stephen Luker on this. But if you look up numbers of Buster Posey and you match them up against Thurman Munson, they're not too far off. They're pretty identical in most categories. Yet people are talking about how Buster Posey is going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Okay, then why isn't Munson? Why isn't
Right.
Thurman Munson a first ballot guy? Obviously, if you're talking 70s, that's the beginning of the Ricky Henderson era. So that's another guy that you can think of. Obviously, we don't talk. I mean, that's the end of the career of Hank Aaron. But
Yep.
it is also too when the Big Red Machine, guys like Joe Morgan, Pete Rose were really kind of coming into their own as well.
How about the 80s?
Oh, where do you start, right? Vince Coleman, Ozzie Smith, Cal Ripken Jr., Tony Gwynn, Bobby Grich, Doug DeCinces.
I'm going to stop you right there, bro, because I noticed a slight change from the 70s to the 80s. In the 70s, you mentioned a lot of the big hitters, right? The Jackson Say, and now in the 80s, 4 or 5 of the first 6 people that you named, speedsters, light hitting, high average, Tony Gwynn, Ozzie Smith.
Yeah. Well, the game kind of changed as well, right? It wasn't about hitting the 5-run home run. It was about making and everybody don't fact check me on that. I know I'm being facetious, right? Every time I say that, somebody's like, and this guy runs a baseball podcast. Doesn't he know there's only 4 runs? Yes, I know 4 runs. I did go to public school, but I get it. So a lot of those guys too. You also had a lot of good pitchers. Nolan Ryan was good in the 70s. He was great in the 80s. Don't forget about guys like Mike Scott. People don't give him enough love because he pitched with Nolan Ryan, right? Let's not forget Mr. Humility himself, Keith Hernandez, the guy that is just known for his humility, right? Let's not forget Keith Hernandez. Let's not forget Dale Murphy. Let's not Dale Murphy's another guy that belongs in the Hall of Fame. Let's not forget Donnie Baseball, Don Mattingly. Let's not forget George Brett, especially George Brett, running out of the dugout with the pine tar incident.
As soon as you mentioned his name, I could see that sprint from the dugout
with a big chew in his mouth, running out there. Look, okay, let's go.
Arms flailing. Oh man. What do you think of this season so far? Any surprises? Any shocks?
I am surprised at. So I'll start with the positive. Well, I'll start with the negatives and then end with the positives. I'm surprised how badly the Colorado Rockies are doing. They're 4-25. At this pace, oh yeah, let's not forget Lenny Dykstra. At this, sorry, Lenny. At this pace, they are going to beat the White Sox record for losses, which is absolutely horrific. It should never be that case. I'm surprised at how how poorly although they're turning around of recent, the Pirates started. I've been surprised at how poorly the Angels started. They started out red hot for about a week, and then they have just fallen apart. I'm surprised at how poorly the Orioles started. I'm also surprised. There's this guy in LA. His name's Shohei Ohtani. He's got either 4 or 5
Is
home
he
runs.
new?
Yeah, but he's only got like 10 RBIs because the bottom of the lineup is not rolling over and getting Shohei what they need to get for him, which is runners on base. I'm very pleasantly surprised at how well. I mean, the Cubs are putting up 4 touchdowns per game, it feels like. Every time I look, they're in double digits. I'm very surprised at how well the Giants are starting off and the Padres. I'm very pleasantly surprised that the Yankees took a big hit with Garrett Cole, but they're okay. They survived. So, to me, those are some of the positive and negative surprises, I guess.
I was surprised. I know you're a Dodgers fan, and
Mhm.
I was looking through the roster to find that Edman leads the team, the offense in WAR actually.
Tommy
And
Tanks.
yep, and it's even more amazing when he's got a 227 batting average on balls in play. So,
Mhm.
you're not going to see regression there. And Betts has been off
No.
to a slow start. Um, how good is this offense going to be for the Dodgers?
It's funny because the Dodgers have taken a lot of heat recently, and I had said this. So let's equate it for a second. My concern at the beginning of the season was equating it to the Lakers, right? There was one season when the Lakers had Shaq and Kobe, but then they went out and they got Gary Payton, Steve Nash, and Karl Malone and missed the playoffs, right? And so for me, it was always a concern. Everybody was saying, "Oh, well, the Dodgers have 97 starting pitchers." They do, but half of them are not are on the IL right now, right? More than half of them. So you have Roki Sasaki, Dustin May, Tony Gonsolin, who's back today, who's pitching phenomenally back, and then you've got Yamamoto. That's it. Everybody else is hurt. Everybody else is hurt, and some of them significantly. But the Dodgers will be just fine. I still think the Dodgers got a shot to win 97. I'd say probably 99 games this season.
Well, I mentioned this to Mark earlier in the show. The Dodgers have kind of taken a Guardians page out of the playbook by developing an outstanding bullpen. I don't think people realize just how good their bullpen is this year and was last year.
hmm
You think that's going to hold up through the
Yes,
season?
I do. The Dodgers won the World Series last year. Somebody told me that. I have to look that up, but I think they won the World Series last year. And their pitching is better this year than it was last year. I don't know what that means, guys, but I think that means something special is about ready to happen.
Yep. So what's next for a road trip for you? What's the next stadium on your list or your bucket list?
Oh, Pittsburgh.
Wow.
So, believe it or not, in early June, we'll be in Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, New York, and Boston. And so I have never been to Pittsburgh. I've been to all the other stadiums that I just mentioned there, but not Pittsburgh.
That's a beautiful, beautiful stadium. One of my favorite settings. I had the fortunate experience of going with my wife, and I said, I just want to go in. We'll spend a few innings. It was a
Yeah.
Friday night. Drove over from Cleveland, and Schmidt had a no-hitter going. And so it was like, let's stay, let's stay. 8 1/3, he lost the no-hitter. But the fans are outstanding in Pittsburgh. What's one of the most memorable things you've seen while attending a game?
I get asked this question a lot, right? I get asked this question a lot. Somebody, so, somebody asked me the other day, what was my most what was the wording that they used? Something about what was the most awkward thing that I had? That's what it was. What's the most awkward thing that I had experienced at a baseball game? And I said, well, I was in high school and I, thought I was big pimping and I took this lady out on a date, this girl out on a date in high school.
Uh-huh.
And they said, well, why is that awkward? And I said, because as we were walking to go get ice cream, we ran into my girlfriend.
Oh,
And so that didn't bode very well. So that got a little awkward. But what's one of the most unique things I saw? Dustin Turner, Justin Turner hitting a base hit through first and second in Game 2 of the 2027 World Series to tie up the game for the Dodgers. I've been in that stadium probably 300 times in my life. I've never felt it move like an earthquake. I did that day. Oh my gosh, when he got that hit, forget about it. It was like an earthquake.
that's amazing. So tell me a little bit about Top Fan.
Okay.
Nope.
It was started in 2022. Actually, it was started in 2020 with a friend of mine. And he and I we're going to start a baseball podcast, an Angels versus Dodgers. He's an Angel fan. I'm a Dodger fan. We're going to roll that thing. It was going to be awesome until I learned really early on that he doesn't know anything about baseball. So I thought, oh, that's not awesome. He doesn't know anything about baseball, and we're going to start a baseball podcast. So in 2022, I bought him out, which was great. Had a couple of health things that I had to deal with in 2022. Got through that and just have been going crazy. So we have a podcast. We are a baseball community. We just launched today a thing that's very similar. Imagine almost like a country club scenario, like a Top Fan Rivalry country club. Kind of announced something today that came out with that. We do softball tournaments. We do all kinds of fun stuff. Travel around to meet people, and it's always fun. It's always fun when you go to a ballpark and you're there with 5 or 7 or 10 or 12 or 18 different of your friends, right? I mean, it's amazing.
And baseball, I think, to your point, is a more social sport because you can't. It's easier to converse. Although with all the stoppages in football now, I guess that's pretty close to it. But baseball really lends itself to the rhythms and the breaks. You know when the break is coming.
Yes.
Was that your first love? How did you fall in love with baseball? Because obviously, all the stuff you're doing, you have to love the game.
I think my love of baseball started when I was probably 5 or 6, and it just went from there, and it just kept going and going and going from there. It was phenomenal, and so I've loved it. I had 2 pitching coaches growing up. I had a pitching coach named John Verhoeven. He was famous for being an Angel and being part of a trade that sent him to Minnesota for some guy named Rod Carew. I heard Rod Carew had a decent career.
Decent career.
Yeah, but he was part of that trade. And so John Verhoeven was one of my pitching coaches. Don Ossie was another one of my pitching coaches. And so it just growing up, that's all I want to do was play baseball, pitch, hang out with girls. If I had time, I wanted to study. But I mean, studying always got in the way of hanging out with the girls or playing baseball. So,
Amen, man. Amen. You have to make it over to Cleveland to see a game at Progressive Field. I mean, that's got to be on your bucket list.
Oh, it is. We were trying to get over to Cleveland and Cincinnati this season. I'm not overly confident that it's going to happen, but I'm not confident either. We've got a pretty good contingent of Reds fans, and we're starting to pick up some Cleveland fans. So if we're going to be in Ohio, we're going to stop and we're going to see the Reds. Stop and see the Guardians. I'm sorry.
Awesome. Well, if you do, please let me know in advance, and I'll do my best to make sure you get some awesome seats to Progressive Field.
Oh, I'd love that. Thank you. That'd be great. 100%.
Bill, I appreciate you coming on for a little bit here. I hope to have you back on again, and we can catch up on the developments over the season. I wish you the best. If you want to give a shout out of your website and
absolutely. TopFanRivalry.com. You can find us at TopFanRivalry.com. You can see it there on the screen. We have a number of just fun things, social media and elsewise. So topfanrivalry.com. I appreciate it. I appreciate you having me on. Reach out anytime, and I'd love to do this again.
Awesome, sir. Good luck with the season this year, and who knows, maybe it'll be a Cleveland LA series.
It should be an easy sweep for LA, but yeah, that would be good. That'd be fun.
It
I'm just
doesn't
teasing
matter.
you, Rob.
I'm so used to losing as a Cleveland fan. It doesn't
All
All right,
my
buddy.
friend.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
You bet. Have a good one.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.